Hello, students of literature and philosophy. I am Katie Mitchell, and this is Cardboard Crash Course. I'm happy to have you here tonight. We have the first edition of the Cardboard Crash Course. We'll be talking about Sophie's World by Jostein Gaarder. The first part, just the first part, the easy part. We'll get it out of the way. Oh, hold on. I just got a tweet. Oh yeah, Jack Diggs. Good one. I too like to read my books backwards like Memento. And that's why I want to take a second to think about Sophie's World in reverse. So why read Sophie's World? To talk about the philosophers that are so important throughout history and to be able to read nonfiction in a fiction class. Why? Well, because it's on the ACT, as I've said, but also because when you read nonfiction, you understand the world in a broader way. And a lot of times, when you're reading nonfiction, you don't get a chance to learn how to read it. So how do you read nonfiction? You read it carefully, you reread it carefully, you do study guides, you allow yourself time and space to pick out the main ideas. And those key concepts are hard to find in Sophie's World. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back through the book and start with myths. So, moving backward through the book, coming back to the beginning. Myths. Yes, myths. Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening. Of course you know about the Greek myths, but there were also the Nordic myths, the Mayan myths. We have all these stories that were being told throughout the world in places that we now know as Africa, as Asia, and all the peoples had stories to explain how things happened. Thor's hammer, Zeus's lightning bolts. These were all ways of explaining natural phenomena. But it wasn't until the Greeks, according to Jostein Gaarder, oh wait, hold on one second. I think I have an open letter to Jostein Gaarder, written on 19th century Austrian artist Gustav Klimt notebook. Dear Jostein, what kind of name is Jostein? So, you tricked us into getting into Sophie's World. As we now know, Sophie is a big lie. You know, we don't like to be fooled. I one time had a fake boyfriend. I thought he was real, but apparently he wasn't real to me, or he wasn't really my boyfriend. But we've been tricked, Jostein. You told us that Sophie's World was real and that we're in Sophie's World, but actually Sophie is not real. Kind of a mean thing to do, but authors do it all the time. It doesn't really matter. We're inside their world the whole time. So that's the first trick. The second trick is the subtitle. Where's the novel in the novel of the history of philosophy? And where is the rest of philosophy? Really, Jostein, you focused only on Western philosophy, and a very small portion of it. And it was surprising to me is, while you are Swedish, you have very few Swedish philosophers. That's because there weren't that many. But, that being said, what about the Arab world? What about the Mongols? What about the Americas? To find out more about this, look at John Green's Crash Course in History to see what really happened and to see how history really is a trick of the writer. That we are constructing history in our moment-to-moment lives by those people who can construct it. Yours truly, Katie Mitchell. Let's get back to my cardboard crash course right here. As you can see, it's Hammer time. Moving on from 700 BC, where we had the myths, into the pre-Socratic period. Excuse me while I move my phone. So neat and tidy. All right, so Mr. Gaarder talks about the natural philosophers. These were our pre-Socratic, watch out there. These were our pre-Socratic philosophers, the natural philosophers. In it, you have people who came before Socrates, who had questions about the world. You have, no, I did practice this, really, I did. You have Heraclitus, All things flow, said Heraclitus. You can't step in the same river twice. Of course, later on, we get to somebody like the history guy, Hegel, who also talks about how history changes things. So keep in mind that we have been talking about how these people have changed all the time. And so you have to keep in mind how Heraclitus and somebody like Hegel are similar. Then you have somebody like Parmenides, who said nothing can come from nothing. You had Democritus, who, of course, talked about the atom and looked at how a Lego was the building block of matter, or the atoms. I put a little M here next to Democritus to show that he was a materialist. He cared about things that were real and solid and studied them. Now, all these scientists obviously cared about products of the earth or things that were happening, natural occurrences. But when it comes to Democritus, he was the materialist. He philosophized about those things that were being built and made and formed, the materialist. Pierre Parmenides was a rationalist. You can see the little thought bubble that I put here. It's actually a light bulb. A light bulb to show that he was a rationalist. He thought through things, as many of the early philosophers did. Over here, my daughters enjoyed coloring in the sophists because they said, we know everything, and you can pay us to teach you. I know some people think that teachers or professors, enjoy the luxurious benefits of teaching, and that we want all your money for doing that. But really, Socrates kind of thought that learning for learning's sake was what really mattered. So we have the sophists. Then you have over here, during this time, this pre-Socratic period, you have the cynics. They lived according to nature. They were not cynical in the modern sense in that they were had a negative view of man, or that they were concerned about, being snarky or smug. They were more concerned about letting things be. They were not materialists. They lived according to nature. So you have all these guys, and then you go down to Miletus, and Jostein Gaarder throws in a bunch of Anaxes, Anaximander, Anaximenes. These guys were concerned with where we come from, how we get there. Okay, where did we first arrive? Where does life begin and end? Questions that we're still asking. Yes, questions we're asking now, and that are going on in politics, that are going on in religion, that are happening in science. These are big questions. That's why Sophie's World is important, is because it gets us back to those questions about where we begin and where we're going. So we have these guys, and we're at 500 BCE. From here, anyway, you have then next the golden age of philosophy. Yes, you can see them now, right? You can see Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Of course you can. Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato kind of fill up that space in Greek history and are sort of the rock stars of philosophy. Obviously, you have Socrates. He was the one who said, I know I do not know. He was a rationalist. He just wanted to keep thinking things through, asked questions. He also died of hemlock, of course. I have that little image that I show throughout how people die. My little death image. He also cared about right and wrong, and Plato built on that. And of course, Plato wrote about Socrates' life because he was a student, and he looked at ideas and how they were formed. And he also was really credited for thinking about the mind-body dualism, that we're not just one, that we're two parts. He also looked at this little ideal state versus the ideal man, that we were supposed to be philosopher kings, right? That our rational thinking was supposed to be the top, most important part of ourselves. And the soldiers, which were equal to courage and the human body or spirit. And then you have the workers and the appetite. Down here you have Aristotle. He is the guy who talked about substance form. He was more of an empiricist. He wanted to organize things and measure and weigh it. That's where Aristotle comes in. He sorted the rocks, dogs, and of course, that's a carrot. Thank you. That's around 400 BC. He looked at science and balance, and maybe he was a little bit wrong. John Green. Another John Gardner's great. John Green talks about that. Moving on. Hellenism. Greek culture. Yeah, I'm actually pretty proud of that. So even though it took about 10 minutes to get the paper rolled over that one, there you go. Greek culture. Death of Alexander the Great. 300 BCE is where we're starting here. And you have, what we care about is sort of the syncretism, the combining of different cultures. And you have here Zeno, who formed the Stoics, and the Epicureans. Epicureans, we've talked a lot about being those YOLO guys, the guys that like to party all night long, whereas the Stoics really thought of each person in macro, that everybody was sort of important, and that you could see the monism there, that there's a natural law, that we all sort of have our own little world. So you must accept it all. Death, good things, happiness, whatever. You have to take it all. And that's sort of where we get our idea of being Stoic, is that we have to just accept everything as it comes. Regardless. Jostein Gaarder focuses then on religion, looks at the Judeo-Christian world. Now, again, this shows his bias, that he's thinking really strongly about those three religions that he calls world religions, that we look at a lot of times and see, you know, the influence of Christianity, Judaism, and Islamic world. Review things that way. Finally, around 200 BCE, we're moving into the Middle Ages. This is the last period that I want to focus on in this first issue of Cardboard Crash Course. You have here the Middle Ages. Again, the Middle Ages lasts from 400 CE to 1400 CE. And what you notice about it is that there's a lot happening. Please see John Green's Crash Course on the Middle Ages to get some of the straight story, that we really have a lot that's happening in the Middle Ages. Not only in the feudal system that was led by the lords and the vassals, but also outside of that small little area that is Europe. But what we care about is that the Roman Empire was divided, and Plato's Academy closed, and you have, in the beginning part of the Middle Ages, you have the philosopher St. Augustine from 354 to 430 CE. And what he cared about was that problem of evil. He looked at what Plato had talked about, and the Neoplatonists had talked about in terms of there being light and darkness. And then he talked about how you can accept the fall of man and choose between good and evil. Very important for him. And he also was influenced by the Stoics and eventually influenced Berkeley, because he said that ideas were in the mind of God. Now, a little bit different than Berkeley there, but it really helped influence Berkeley's thinking. So we have to give some credit to St. Augustine and his look at the fall of man. Of course, later on, really a long time period later, look at those dates on that. St. Aquinas, who was from 1225 to 1274 CE, he Christianized Aristotle, is what Jostein Gaarder says. And by that, he means that he used his rational thinking to kind of think about the ways that we can take Christianity to the masses. That is the first issue or edition of Crash Course, Cardboard Crash Course by Katie Mitchell. Please stay tuned for better production quality and maybe an assistant or two. Artist done by Halea Lindsay and Jesse Mitchell. Thanks for the coloring. And, oh, what's this? Is this Winnie the Pooh? What? Where did he come from, Jostein Gaarder? Thank you, and good night.